share some troubling impaired driving numbers from the holiday season. Good evening and thank you for joining us. Thunder Bay Police say some people still aren't getting the message about the dangers of impaired driving.
The results of the annual Festive RIDE program were announced today, revealing some concerning trends over the past few years. Jessica Clement has the details.
Officers were out this holiday season once again to crack down on those who were driving impaired. Constable Tom Armstrong with the traffic unit says the Festive RIDE program was successful as far as enforcement goes.
We arrested a significant number of impaired drivers, contacted a lot of different people. I think tried to kind of spread our message about impaired driving awareness.
This year saw 32 impaired driving charges, which broke down to 8 drug impairments, 19 alcohol impairments, and 5 breathalyzer refusals. This number is slightly up from last year, which saw 31 charges. Of course, the police's efforts to curb impaired driving is a year-round initiative. 2023 saw an overall total of 217 impaired driving charges, 13 more than 2022. Armstrong says it's a concerning trend.
We're not seeing a decline, which is disappointing, despite all the messaging, education, enforcement. So that's kind of where we're banging our heads against the wall a little bit. I think in 2019, numbers spiked over 200. We thought it might be a bit of an anomaly, and we've maintained that well north of 200 for the last 5 years. So this is kind of the new normal, and it's a concerning pattern. So despite all the things we're trying to do to combat it.
Armstrong says, unfortunately, some drivers don't realize how severe the consequences are.
Now for 90 days from that moment, you're not driving. You've lost your car, you've lost your driver's license. You're going to have to go through a court process. You're going to have a criminal record, the fines, the suspensions, the inconvenience of it all. And God forbid you get in a collision like one of many we've had this year. We've had some catastrophic impaired driver-related collisions this year, and those have far wider reaching consequences.
Police will continue with their public awareness campaigns and RIDE programs, and officers will keep performing proactive enforcement day and night. Police conclude by offering a stern reminder to find another way home if you're impaired by alcohol or drugs, to prevent injuries, and to keep yourself out of trouble. Jessica Clement, TBT News.
This as 2 city police officers saved the life of an impaired driver early this morning. Officers found an unresponsive man slumped over his wheel after colliding with a parked vehicle at the intersection of Brunswick and Waterloo Streets around 5:15. Police removed the man and performed life-saving measures. The 30-year-old Thunder Bay man has been charged with impaired driving and has been released with a future court date.
A driver was sent to hospital with life-threatening injuries after a serious crash on Highway 11 yesterday. The victim was the only occupant of the vehicle. The collision happened west of Atikokan in the Flanders Road area. It forced the complete closure of the highway until early this morning.
22 out of the 25 long-term care patients at Atikokan's hospital were forced into isolation last week as a result of a considerable COVID outbreak in the facility. 15 of those 22 patients tested positive for the virus. The other 7 are in isolation because they have COVID symptoms. Visitation is restricted, but each resident is allowed 1 caregiver at a time. Hospital CEO Jennifer Learning says it's not surprising to see a COVID outbreak during this respiratory season.
We have surge meetings regularly with the whole region because they know that this is a respiratory season, that it's increasing. There's RSV, there's the flu, there's COVID. It seems to be sort of what we're going through now. We are healthcare workers, I feel, it's part of what we're living with now. It's part of, like, when we look for the flu, we have a whole outbreak on flu, we have a whole outbreak on COVID. It's just part of our life now, right?
To help prevent the spread of the virus, staff are required to wear N95 masks.
As hospitals across the province continue to struggle with staffing shortages, a new survey shows things are likely to get worse unless big changes are made.
Many healthcare workers that took part say they dread coming to work and are considering quitting. Mike Walker has the details.
The union representing thousands of hospital workers in Ontario say the staffing crisis will only get worse and tough times are ahead, pointing to a new survey of more than 700 healthcare workers on the front lines.
The surveys are alarming and illustrate the gravity of staffing crises that have been years in the making, but which is now reaching a new breaking point.
The survey conducted by Nanos Research for CUPE found that 41% dread going into work and 62% face high stress levels and experience exhaustion.
due to their working conditions. There's 19,000 vacancies across Ontario hospitals. Often they're working short.
The survey also found that nearly 80% are not confident the Ford government will improve the healthcare system this year, and that 43% are considering leaving their job within the next year.
Be devastating. We're already seeing turnover rates of 10% per year, and this has been consistently high since COVID has hit.
This emergency physician says the burnout and dissatisfaction among hospital workers is not surprising.
People don't mind hard work. You know, this is what we signed up for. This is what we want to do. It's hopeless work is the issue. And these decisions, these resource crunches take a toll. We hire new grads. 3 to 4 months later, they're gone to an easier job somewhere else.
Staffing shortages have resulted in the closures of some units in hospitals right across the province. Union leaders are calling on the government to develop strategies to attract and retain healthcare workers, better compensation, and staff-to-patient ratios.
If we don't see a significant investment by this government, we feel that the healthcare system will spiral on a downward trend.
In order to achieve that, they say the government must invest an additional $1.25 billion annually over the next 4 years. Mike Walker, CTV News.
The Greenstone Public Library created more than $3.3 million of economic benefit in 2023, according to a recent assessment. It's one of the first libraries in the province to make use of a new tool aimed at helping libraries put a dollar value to their free services. The Ontario Library Service launched a toolkit in November, designed to help libraries measure their economic value. The toolkit looks at direct and indirect benefits across 7 categories. In Greenstone, the inclusion and well-being category was by far the most important, with a value of $1 million for the library's accessible collections, health and social programming, and computer and internet access.
It's difficult to put a value on something that is a service provided for free, correct? So this actually put a dollar value on our computers, and every time somebody sat on a chair and read a book, and every time somebody came in and participated in an activity or event.
The library's total spending in 2023 was just over $541,000. Most of that came from municipal coffers. According to the toolkit, that marks a social return on investment of $6.12 for every dollar spent.
A local man has returned from the adventure of a lifetime after sailing from Halifax all the way to Portugal.
The trip took Dan Turk 33 days in his sailboat, the Little Bee. And as Josh Morano tells us, the high school teacher's already planning his next journey.
Dan Turk has enjoyed sailing for over 2 decades, but has never experienced an adventure on the water quite like this. Turk set out from Halifax after nearly 2 years to build his boat, the Little Bee, on his quest for Portugal. He sailed non-stop for 23 days until he got to the Azores Islands, then another 10 days to reach Portugal. Turk says beyond all the building, planning, and prepping, it was an amazing experience.
I saw all kinds of wonderful things in terms of the environment. Stars from horizon to horizon, whales and dolphins and sea turtles, squid on the deck of the boat, and all kinds of wildlife like that. It was just great.
Turk left Little Bee in Portugal and made his way back home to Thunder Bay. Since he's been home, Turk has already begun plans to get back out on the water, starting a campaign to race in the next 2 class association races, the Transat and the Mini Globe Race, taking him across the world over the span of a year.
The Mini Globe Race is a non-stop around-the-world race that's going to stop at 11 different destinations. So the first, it starts in Antigua, in the Caribbean, it goes to Panama, Tahiti, Tonga, Fiji, Darwin in Australia, all the way to Mauritius and Cape Town, and then all the way back to the Caribbean again. So it's all in total, it'll take about 14 months.
If everything goes according to plan, Turk will head out on another adventure at the end of the year. He adds Little Bee will be making the journey with him. Josh Morano, TBT News.
Forget a wild goose chase. A local family recently embarked on a wild chicken chase. Here's how the feathered fowl flew the coop. The Lebanon family had a scare a couple weeks ago when one of their chickens escaped in the back of a friend's truck while eating some deer feed. Nicknamed Old Girl by Saul Lebanon's 8-year-old son Toivo, she traveled all the way from the township of O'Connor to the Tim Hortons at County Fair. Old Girl was later picked up near John Street Road. Nobody knows what plan the chicken was hatching, but Old Girl has returned safely after her excellent adventure.
That was pretty hectic. We kept looking online, and he's like, there's no way we're going to get her. It's 1 in 100, 1 in a million, he's going. And when we got her back, he was just astonished.
Lebanon says Old Girl is back home with their other chickens and is doing well. That's just
what an adventure,
True.
going from O'Connor all the way to Tim Hortons.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It had a good ending to the story, though. I'm glad she's back where she belongs.
It absolutely did. And Fiona, I guess if you're going to go on an adventure, you might as well do it while the temperatures are still a little warmer than we expect to see at this time of year.
Yes, we did have a high of -2. Unfortunately for most of us, that was while we were in bed. Temperatures have been falling all day, so Old Girl probably was a little bit surprised to see what the temperatures were doing. We had lots of sunshine today, but we started out at -2 and a wind chill of -8 and fell down to a low of -15, and wind chills pretty close to that. Winds were from the northwest 10 to 32 kilometers per hour. Now, we had a little bit of precipitation through the south of Thunder Bay, but most of northwestern Ontario stayed nice and sunny. At this hour, we've got much cooler temperatures than yesterday. Most locations saw temperatures falling throughout the day. Were fairly consistent, -12 in Fort Francis, Dryden, -13 for Atikokan, Upsala, Sioux Lookout, and into Red Lake. Just partly cloudy for the most part, and then to the east, we've got just a few lingering flurries moving through Greenstone, also at -13 at this hour. Sault Ste. Marie, the hot spot with a little bit of snow showers. They're currently at -6 and a wind chill of about -10 at this time. Now tonight we are looking at partly cloudy skies, but this is much more what we should be seeing for this time of year. A low of -21 and wind chills of -25. If that's a little bit of reality is too much of a shock to the system, I have sort of some good news. We are going to rebound a little tomorrow, but not a whole lot. And I'll have more details on that later on in the news hour.
Okay, thanks a lot, Fiona. Your good news wasn't quite as good as I was hoping, because those temperatures definitely are a shock to the system, but it is that time of year. Okay, when we return, we'll turn our attention to international news. More than 100 people are dead after a pair of explosions in Iran today. We'll have those details and more when your news hour continues right after the break.